Treatment of his two teenage brothers.
Meanwhile, the state of Washington is about to be sued for the wrongful death of that teenager. Lisa Balick has been following this story. She joins us live now. Lisa?
Yeah, one thing you have to keep in mind in all this is Karreon was 15 years old when he died. He weighed 61 pounds. That's why there were a lot of questions that led to what's going on in court and another lawsuit pending. 15-year-old Karreon Franks died in 2020, just minutes after he was brought to a hospital by his adoptive mother, Felicia Adams. A doctor there alerted Child Protective Services. Prosecutors maintain that Karreon and his brothers were restricted access to food and given physical punishment. In court this week, one of the surviving brothers reportedly testified how food was restricted, he was locked in a room at times, and hit with a paddle and electrical cord. But the parents' attorneys say Karreon had medical conditions that resulted in his death. While the murder trial is underway, the state of Washington is on notice now. It will be facing a civil lawsuit over negligence. The attorney representing the surviving brothers and the estate of Karreon tells me the state's social worker, who went to the home to check on complaints the boys were being denied food, never talked to Karreon, even just days before he died.
Had they would have had contact with Karreon, they would have seen that he was severely emaciated and only weighed around 60 to 65 pounds. And that should have obviously cued them to call an ambulance to get the boy immediate medical attention.
That attorney says there were also complaints from outside family members going back 3 years before Karreon died that were dismissed.
Karreon's caregivers were depriving him with food and water as a disciplinary measure. And the state caseworker determined that it did not meet the definition of neglect under our laws and closed out the file.
I reached out to the Washington Department of Children, Youth and Families that oversees child welfare. They say they cannot comment on pending litigation.
Yeah, now this story happened in 2020 in the state of Washington. And this is a shame. Jesse and Felicia Adams, you guys need to be ashamed of yourself. Completely is responsible for the murder of this young man. Now, according to the Associated Press, the adoptive parents convicted in the starving death of a 15-year-old boy in Washington state have been sentenced to decades in prison. Now, Judge Susan Clark last week sentenced Felicia L. Adams to 35 years in prison and Jesse Franks to 30 years in the 2020 death of Karreon Franks. The couple also had been convicted on charges of criminal mistreatment of Karreon's brothers, the Colombian newspaper reported. Attorneys for Adam and Franks said they plan to appeal the convictions and sentences. Clark called what happened to Karreon one of the saddest things I've seen in 37 years. She said she had never before returned to her chambers after a trial and had all the jurors in tears because of what they had been through. An alternate juror complained of being unable to sleep. Now, Adams, 54, and Franks, 58, were convicted by a jury in Clark County Superior Court in October. Now, Karreon was autistic, had developmental delays, was legally blind, and used a cane. Prosecutor Laurel Smith called him an extremely vulnerable child. Prosecutors said at trial that he and his brothers were accustomed to food restrictions and corporal punishment at their home in Vancouver, Washington. Karreon lost 47% of his body weight between July 2019 and his death on November 27, 2020, dropping from 115 pounds to 61 pounds, prosecutors said. For much of that time, he was isolated at home due to the pandemic. Now, he was 115 pounds at 15 years old. That is completely ridiculous. How could somebody do that to a child? And he had developmental issues as well. and partially blind, that is crazy. Now, the female Adams, the boy's maternal aunt, said that if defense didn't get an opportunity to put on certain evidence for the court, Franks blamed his lack of education and job training for not taking an active role in the household. Are you kidding me? He's blaming his lack of education and job training for not taking an active role in the household. Where's your humanity at? It doesn't take all that just to nurture that boy and love that child, but instead you're going to deprive him for the things that he needs. That's no excuse, man. Now, during the legal proceedings, the legal motions came in a flurry after attorneys learned of a combined $55 million tort claim filed on behalf of Karreon Franks' estate and his surviving brothers, now 16 and 17. Now, Seattle-based Davis Law Group filed the tort claims July 18th against the Washington Department of Health and Social Services and Department of Children, Youth, and Families. The tort claims are seeking $25 million for Karreon's estate and $15 million for each of his brothers. Now, one of Karreon's neighbors gave an account of what he witnessed during the time Karreon was alive.
That happened, down the street.
This neighbor, who didn't want to be identified, told us about the first time he met Karreon Franks.
Skinny as bones. It was just sad because he was just like begging for water.
He says it was a rare occasion. The 15-year-old, who authorities say was severely autistic and legally blind, was sitting outside with some of the neighborhood kids, and it was apparent Karreon was very thirsty.
Give him some water, and that's what I said. And the kids were like, no, we can't give him water, he'll pee his pants, and then we'll get in trouble. And I said, F that. And I came in the house, got a bottle of water, gave him a bottle of water, you know what I mean?
The man says people in the neighborhood didn't find out until April, but according to law enforcement, Karreon died last year, the day after Thanksgiving. The teenager weighed only 61 pounds. Court records say he was starved to death. Last Friday.
I think that's what most people would do. Anybody with some compassion in their heart would try to get that boy some help. Depriving him of food and water, that doesn't make any sense, man. These people have nothing but the devil in them. Now, in addition to convicting Felicia Adams, 54, and Jesse Franks, 58, in Karreon's death, the jury of 7 women and 5 men found them guilty of 2 counts of second-degree criminal mistreatment of Karreon's brothers, and then 14 and 13 years old. Jurors also found a number of aggravating factors for each defendant. The jury deliberated just shy of 4 hours and reached its verdict at about 4:30 p.m., concluding the 2-week trial. Let me just say, rest in peace, Karreon, and I hope that your family gets that lawsuit and your brothers can take that money and can continue their lives and have a productive life. So rest in peace, young man. All right, I'm gone.